welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Wapner presiding. This is On Trial, brought to you by the Radulich Broadcasting Network. And tonight, I am your defense attorney, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And on the docket, the multi-Oscar winning Dances with Wolves, brought to you by Kevin Costner, based on the book by Michael Blake. Folks, we're winding up the summer of Sean. This was his pick. And speaking of Sean, here he is, prosecuting this epic Western film, his choice. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Sean, you're not. How do you do, Sean?
Sean drinks because movie too long for the prosecution, Your Honor.
Oh, boy, is it ever. Holy cow.
And you wondered why I picked this.
Why did you pick this? You've been sort of hinting around it. You know, we've touched on it here or there, but let's get into it. We're ending the summer of Sean on Dances with Wolves. Why? Why would you do this to us?
You know, it's, believe it or not, there's no real sadistic ulterior motive behind my choice here. What it comes down to is this. I had not watched this movie in... when was the one and only time I actually watched this all the way through? I think I had to have been about 12, 13 years old, something like that. My dad and I grew up both big movie fans, but with widely disparate tastes in favorite movies. He loved anything that was gritty and rooted as deeply as possible in realism and historical fact. So he has often hailed this as one of his favorite movies of all time and one of the finest ever made. The one time I remembered watching it, I remembered thinking that it was certainly impressive. It was a big movie. It seemed like an important movie. But I didn't really remember much else about it. I didn't even remember if I enjoyed it or not. So I decided some 23, 22 years later to actually give it a watch and see if it holds up. And especially to see if it holds up as being a deserving Best Picture winner during one of the last few years when the movies that were often nominated for or won Best Picture and a lot of other Oscars could seriously be called, yes, some of the greatest movies ever made. Spoiler, I don't think it holds up all that well. I really, really don't. And I almost felt bad for just making you sit through this 3-hour bloated slab of Oscar bait.
I'm not going to lie. The movie was on in my presence from start to finish, but I'd be lying if I tell you that I didn't nap through some of it. And I'd have to go back and read the Wikipedia page and be like, what's happening now? Oh, okay, I got it. I would be
lying if I said I could blame you. And my God, we are two guys who, I don't know about you, but at least once a year, I gladly, usually on a holiday, run the 3 extended cuts of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy back to back to back.
Yeah, those I could watch with no problem.
Right, exactly. This one, it's... And I've had movies like this, I've had TV shows like it, I've even played a few video games like it. It's one of those that Yeah, in a way, I'm glad I can say that I sat down, I saw it at least once, I'm somewhat familiar with it. Let us never watch or speak of it again.
You know, I 100% agree with that. I had never seen this before. This is the first time I've ever seen it, and it was one of those where it's like, I feel like as a film person I should see it, and now that I have, I don't ever have to do it again. So
it's and you know, every form of entertainment has either these musicians or actors or directors or comedians or writers where their peers, their fellow artisans and performers, absolutely adore them. They consider them masters of their craft, and they just cannot stop glowing about them. On the other hand, when it comes to casual audiences, they just kind of listen to them or watch them or read them and just go, eh? Okay. And if they were to say that to one of these, you know, other supposedly better read, better educated peers, they would probably just get some kind of snooty response of, oh, you just don't understand art. You dullard, you Philistine. You dirty, filthy, nanny poo-head. Sorry, folks, sometimes boring is boring and shit is shit.
Let me jump in here and say, and this might be an unpopular opinion, and that's fine. It's my opinion, though. I would compare this is to me the Western version of Blade Runner. In all of those things that you're talking about. I mean, obviously not in plot, but it's that I look around and I see every sci-fi nut loves Blade Runner. Just thinks it's the best. It's referenced by a lot of pop culture personalities, you know, Patton Oswalt, etc. And you know, because the sequel came out last year, you know, we didn't do an on trial or we tried. I don't remember. We did, but you know, we saw the sequel. I watched the original or some version of the original, and I kind of looked around and went, I haven't the foggiest fucking clue why people are into this. This was another one that bored me to tears.
See, you compare it to Blade Runner. The one I come up with, and you want to talk about unpopular opinions, I'll batten down the hatches because here comes one. It's the Andy Kaufman of historical epics.
Wow, that's a loaded comment.
Because Andy Kaufman is one of those comedians that, for years, I've heard some of the greatest names of comedy hail as a visionary and a genius. And I just kind of go, great performance artist? Yes. Great sitcom actor? Yeah, to an extent. But as far as being somebody who could just make me laugh at the drop of a hat that I actually found really entertaining as a comedic artist, nah. or you know, prog rock bands are another one, or even more than prog rock. Neil Young, one of those people you would hear some people hail him up and down as just a messiah among singer-songwriters and musicians. Okay, his stuff with Crosby, Stills, and Nash aside, you've heard one Neil Young song, you've really heard just about all of them. In terms of actually listening to them, in terms of them actually being fun to listen to. It's okay, yeah, you can maybe sit there once and kind of appreciate the artistry, the lyrics, but as far as something where you can just kind of put an album on and just kind of be, wow, I'm glad I spent that hour of my life on that. No. that's kind of what this is I can so easily appreciate the depth of the film craft that went into it, and how, as I'll get into, it truly is an underdog story in terms of the fact this movie even got made at all. But as for something I actually enjoyed watching, God, no. I could have spent that time watching 3 episodes from the horrible final season of Dexter and possibly been more entertained. And maybe even more moved than I was by this movie. But this is just my opinion, and it's probably going to be an unpopular one. But this is one of those times I don't really have to play act that much when presenting my case.
All right, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on the plot synopsis here. It basically, it's 1863, and Kevin Costner plays a Union soldier, John J. Dunbar. He's wounded in battle, and instead of having his leg amputated, he ends up riding into battle, drawing fire, and allowing the Union to have a victory. For his efforts, he is rewarded with a new post. His post is on the frontier, which is where he wanted to be in the first place. He ends up going to Fort Hays, which looks to be abandoned. And in the distance is the Sioux Indian tribe. It starts off contentious, as as it would be between Union soldiers and Native Americans. Over time, they start to engage one another and then become friendly, and then he kind of becomes adopted into the tribe. He meets a woman there, and a Caucasian woman who had been raised by the tribe, who is stands with Fist, I believe her name is.
Stands with the Fist. Yep.
Stands with the Fist, yeah. Long story short, he ends up helping them in their battle against the Pawnee, and eventually they'll end up engaging with the Union Army. And the movie ends with Kevin Costner and Stands with a Fist being married and going off together by themselves, and eventually, as we all know, the American National Army destroys the Native Americans, and they go on to create billion-dollar
casinos. And the white
casinos.
man and the Indians were friends forever after.
I was going to say, and those few Indians that survived went on to create the billion-dollar casino industry.
John J. Dunbar saved the American Indians. The end.
Yeah, right. So that's more or less the movie in a nutshell. It was like that's kind of the 10-cent review of the plot. But boy, did they stretch everything I just said out for hours. All right, Sean. Let's open up the prosecution of Dances with Wolves. Take the stand, please.
I honestly cannot think of very many movies, either that we've covered or even that I've ever heard of, that went from failed movie pitch to novel, back to screenplay, and ultimately became Best Picture winners. So 28 years ago, this movie really broke some ground because, all things considered, it never should have worked, because in 1990, Westerns in general were regarded by most studios as being prohibitively expensive, generally overly long, and often came with the challenge of dialogue not written in English. So basically the idea was, if you wanted to successfully get a movie within this genre made, you had to make it cheaply, you had to keep it short, and everything had to be in a language that everyone can easily understand. What we have here is an idea that came about because screenwriter Michael Blake, who passed away in the early 2000s, happened to meet Kevin Costner in a Los Angeles acting class and pitched him the idea of Dances with Wolves. Costner, in turn, told him, don't write this as a screenplay, write it as a novel. That will ignite more studio buzz than just another cold script. So, ultimately, Blake ended up sleeping on friends' couches and writing and living out of his car, including a brief stint living with Costner. In fact, he said in a behind-the-scenes feature on the film before his death, I wrote the entire book in my car, really. So he submits it to one publisher after another, and each and every one of them passed on it. About 30 rejections later, this tiny publisher named Fawcett accepts it. When the time came to finally actually make this as a movie, it nearly broke Blake's friendship with Costner. Costner repeatedly got this guy meetings with studio representatives to pitch this script, to get him work on absolutely anything while he was working on this. But Blake, one opportunity after another, as Costner once told Tim Ferriss on the Tim Ferriss show, Costner really started to lose his patience because Blake kept starting fights with the executives. Until at one point, legend has it, Costner pinned the man against a wall and told him, "Quit pretending you want to be in Hollywood." And while they were living together, Blake would repeatedly harass Costner to read his screenplay again and again and again and again. Kevin Costner refused until the point came when Blake wore out his welcome. They parted ways, and Blake ended up washing dishes at an Arizona Chinese restaurant for $3.35 an hour. He even once rang up Costner asking for money. Costner sent him a sleeping bag and a portable stove. Once Blake had finished the book, he asked Costner to read it again, and when Costner finally got through it, he later said, "It was the clearest idea for a movie that I had ever read." That didn't mean that getting it made was going to get any easier, because, again, one American studio after another told Costner, yeah, no, not going to happen. And eventually, even after they put together a small fraction of this movie's $15 million 1990 budget, Orion Pictures comes in, kicks in another $10 million, still goes $3 million over budget, because, of course, we're talking about a movie that was shot at over 30 locations across Wyoming and South Dakota, a shooting script that necessitated 3,500 real, no trick shot or CGI buffalo, more than 3 dozen teepees, all made from genuine buffalo hide, 300 horses, 2 wolves, and a cadre of genuine American Indian extras. On top of that, they had to bring in Doris Leadercharge, a teacher at Sinte Gleska University in South Dakota, as a dialogue coach to teach the Lakota language and culture, because almost nobody could translate it, let alone actually speak it competently. They sent the script to her, and 3 weeks later she had it fully translated and sent it right back, and even got her a small speaking part in the film. The infamous buffalo hunt sequence, no trickery. That was the real deal. 3,500 gigantic furry beasts rampaging across 100% genuine article prairie. And actually, a small aside, a sidebar, if you will. I spent 4.5 years of my life living in South Dakota, so I have actually seen quite a few of these shooting locations. In fact, it's a big tourist attraction there. And, you're talking about animals that even once you rounded them up and got them running, they would run for miles without stopping. That's the entire hunt sequence consumed 8 days, employing more than 20 wranglers, a helicopter, and 10 pickup trucks with mounted cameras to shoot the whole damn thing. Costner Costner did most of his own stunts, 95% of his own writing, shooting, fighting, dancing with wolves. It was all at the time one of the biggest bankable stars in Hollywood. Doing absolutely the real thing, and he even got thrown from his mount at one point while shooting the aforementioned Hunt. That's the highlights. That's the highlights of it. And the talk around Hollywood was that this was a make or break deal for Costner. And keep in mind, this was all years before Waterworld. Way before that. Ultimately, however, I have to admit, before I get into the actual prosecution, it's hard to argue with making a movie on a, let's see, what did the actual total ultimately come to? $22 million $1990 budget that made $424.2 million $1990. Holy bloody shit. We are talking about a high-risk, high-reward gamble of a movie here. And again, one that, all things considered, it never should have happened. And oh yeah, by the way, on top of this, the major studio behind this, Orion. Yes, that Orion. Bankrupt laughingstock Orion. In fact, this movie kind of bought it a little bit of time to stay alive just a hair longer than it probably should have. So that's the story I meant to tell behind how this movie got made and why I feel so bad about just about everything that I'm about to say about it. Because it truly is an inspiring tale of sticking to your guns, believing in your dream, backing your creative vision when absolutely nobody else will. But at the same time, I may not know art, but I know what I like, and we'll get into that. But to once more back up and make this even less circuitous, even less of a straight line. Let's go back to the 63rd Academy Awards. This was a different time. It was a time when you only had 5 movies nominated each year. If you want to look at the ultimate shining example of why, in the end, the Academy just felt so fucking sorry for Martin Scorsese, look no further. Because the nominees for Best Picture that year were Awakenings. Okay. Good movie. I remember it quite fondly. But, Best Picture of the year? Yeah. Ghost? Yeah. Good. Okay, maybe one of the best of the year, but it's also become kind of a joke butt over the years. The Godfather Part 3. And finally...
And we love Bart.
Let us never speak of the shortcut again. And finally, the fourth and final movie that Dances with Wolves beat out for Best Picture. Mark, would you care to guess what it was? Without Wikipedia, without the benefit of Google, would you care to guess what this movie was?
Pretty Woman.
Goodfellas.
That was close.
Yeah, you were close in the sense that
I named a movie.
In the sense of, if I were to, try to shoot the moon and somehow blow my dick off, that would be close. But no, Goodfellas. Fucking Goodfellas. And not only And Dances with Wolves beat Goodfellas in a combined 3 categories. Best Picture, Costner beat Scorsese for Best Director, and it also won for Best Screenplay based on material from another medium, shortened to Best Adapted Screenplay. Let me double check. Did it get beaten in the other categories? I think that's it. Because I know that it won a combined 7 awards. Okay, Best Original Score, Goodfellas was not nominated for that. It beat Days of Thunder, Dick Tracy, Hunt for Red October, and Total Recall for Best Sound. It beat Avalon, Dick Tracy, Henry and June, and The Godfather Part 3 for Best Cinematography. Oh, okay, and it did beat Goodfellas in one other category. Best Cinematography. Okay. Hard to argue with that one. I got to give it that. But the fact is, hindsight being what it is, Dances with Wolves deserves to be remembered as one of the movies where the term Oscar bait began. Because Goodfellas is a movie that is not... Yes, it's remembered as a cliche, but it's also remembered as being a marvel of acting, writing, and film craft. Dances with Wolves deserves to be remembered as simply just a master class of film craft. That's it. Is it a technical wonder? Yes. Was everybody a workhorse? Absolutely. Is it astonishing that this somehow came in at a then reasonable budget and made absolutely phenomenal bank at the box office? Yes, although I'll explain shortly why it is that shouldn't be quite as surprising. But I ask you, which of these movies is actually more fun to watch? Which one is going to be more captivating as an audience, having seen both of them? Frankly, I posit that if you say that Dances with Wolves actually gave you more of a charge watching it than Goodfellas, with all its remarkably quotable dialogue, its moments that stick with you for a lifetime, a clear-cut plot, evenly paced storytelling, superb score and incidental music, landmark performances by the likes of Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Ray Liotta. Frankly, you're a fucking liar if you try to claim that, and you're just trying to force the argument. There is no argument. I mean, look at the fact that, and yes, I'm going to kind of enter this into evidence despite the fact that it was said prior to us actually beginning our arguments. The defense openly stated he fell asleep during the movie, and, you know, even right now, probably could not tell you what happened during a number of portions of it.
Objection. I was also up at 4 o'clock this morning.
Grudgingly sustained. But it also speaks to just how drawn out this movie is. And this is only one framing of argument. It's just comparing the leads. Compare Ray Liotta and his dynamic delivery, his energy to the fact that Costner, in absolutely every way, in every scene, he just sounds like Kevin Costner in Civil War cosplay. That's what he sounds. That's what he sounds and looks like. Kevin Costner in Civil War cosplay with an epic stash. That's about it. He is Ray from Field of Dreams, you know, running around in a fancy uniform and occasionally Lakota Sioux Indian garb. That's about the size of it. and that runs the gamut straight from his narration down to almost every line in the movie. And that brings me to something else that the movie deserves to be both heralded for and, quite frankly, taken to task on a number of occasions. And that is its commitment to period accuracy. It tries. God love it, it tries to get things right. And in many ways, it's an admirable commitment. It is phenomenal authenticity. I'm even willing to forgive the fact that when they depict the white man massacring the buffalo, they depicted that really a few years, about 7 to 10 years before that would have actually become commonplace, and that would have been a thing. But it's forgivable because they still went to those great pains to still portray that accurately, and there's the fact that that actually did happen. So getting it a few years out of place, willing to overlook that. But then you have the other factors that make the movie kind of an unfortunate product of its time. And that is, it came at a time when America as a country was still wrestling with what was a relatively new framing of relations between early white Americans and American Indians. I remember this vividly because I was in elementary school at the time, and we would be taught one thing about the Indians and the white settlers, and then we would come home, and my dad, of course, being born of a different era, would tell us, no, that's not happened. This is what I was taught. This is the real deal. They're getting it all wrong. It's just all politically correct nonsense. The thing is, in terms of a lot of fiction, you had movies made during this time, and in particular the two that stick out most are this one and, of all movies, Disney's Pocahontas, that are kind of insistent on this false narrative of, oh boy, things were a little rocky at first between the whites and the Indians. And, the whites did some really awful things, but eventually we made things all right. We worked things out, and, we still were the heroes, and we did some good stuff. That's kind of part of the issue that I really took with the whole plot of the movie. And that is this idea that, yes, by this point, historically, Americans already had been encroaching on American Indian lands, overrunning them, running the Indians off of them. They were becoming an ever-increasing threat. But in this movie, we're just not content to simply say, yes, at this time, we were pretty much the bad guys. No, at this point, kind of like in The Last Samurai or Avatar, no, we have to make the white man the hero too. We still have to kind of make him the good guy, and even really stretch things to do it. Like the notion that John Dunbar was the man who introduced this Lakota Sioux tribe to coffee. You mean to tell me that these American Indians who had been probably trading with, furriers and other settlers who had been passing through had never been offered coffee by one of them? Really? In fact, kind of the whole idea that this tribe had barely seen a white man before, and were just marveled at him. He was something of a celebrity. He was from the encroaching, threatening white people, and yet he was a hero and an oddity among them. he taught them how to use guns, and there's the moment during the one battle when he has to stop the one warrior and tell him how to use a damn rifle. Okay, this was post Gold Rush. The white men had been through a number of times. They had come through en masse en route to California, seeking their fortune. Chances are, and in fact, history kind of dictates this, by the point when this movie is supposed to take place, no, they were pretty familiar with firearms. That they were good with the boomstick. They knew how this worked. You know, you kind of don't have to paint them as clods like this. There's the notion that it's kind of implied that they took Stands with a Fist in as a girl after, battling with, and I believe outright killing her band of settlers out of some sense of compassion. Well, as I learned during my research, yes, the Indians did take in women and children, but it wasn't so much because they felt bad as out of a pragmatic interest in having a means of kind of rebuilding their own numbers as they went along. So it kind of becomes borderline idyllic in its attempt to sort of force the white savior narrative. Especially when we're talking about a time when white settlers were anything but saviors to the American Indians. In fact, a little bit of a fun fact: John Dunbar. There was actually historically a John Dunbar, but he was not an army lieutenant. No, in fact, he was a missionary. By all means, go read up on about how well things went when Christianity was kind of forced upon American Indians. Spoiler: not always well. It's not necessarily viewed as always a welcome chapter. So what you have here is a movie that's overly long, not enjoyable to watch. After you watch it, it's hard to really pin down very many moments that just stick with you, that you'll be able to quote for the rest of your life, that you'll always be able to recite chapter and verse, because, man, you were just that into it, and it's just that is highlighted in your mind. You've got a movie that took some pretty drastic historical liberties and plays into what was I'll call it a brief but really unfortunate chapter in trying to historically depict what was a bloody, violent, colonialist chapter in American history. Quite frankly, I posit that the Academy got it wrong on this one. The floor is yours.
Okay. The prosecution told you a tale about this movie that, he looked at, historical accuracy. He looked at a number of different things. What I'm here to tell you is that, objectively speaking, this is a very beautiful-looking movie. Yes, it's slow. It's kind of quiet. It definitely has an old Western motif to it, and either you like Westerns or you don't. But I think, objectively speaking, outside of Kevin Costner's narration at times, which feels like he was just reading off cue cards, admittedly, the rest of the movie is acted fine. Nobody particularly stands out as giving a poor performance. Everybody on set and captured on film is believable in their roles. There's great costuming. The sets and settings are very picturesque. It really takes you there. I'm transported to 1863. I'm transported to that place in time. And that's, for a period piece such as this, what more can you ask for? We talked about the length of the movie. And look, myself and Robert Winfrey will often beat up on critics who complain about the length of certain movies. And I think there's a discussion to be had for whether or not a movie feels bloated. Here's the thing. I would argue that Dances with Wolves is exactly how long it needed to be. Mind you, there's a 4-hour cut out there somewhere that you can watch. If you're really hold back, don't make a joke. You're supposed to be defending this.
Wait. Hyperbole, or are we serious that there's a 4-hour cut movie out there?
There's a special edition 4-hour cut out there somewhere.
Nope. Nope.
So if you feel like in 3 hours they just didn't tell enough of the story, there's a 4th hour out there for you. Have fun.
I'll watch Highlander 2 first.
But the point that I was getting to, and I don't have a tremendously long defense here, but I think the movie told you the story it needed to tell you. It took its time, obviously, in getting to where it needed to go. And you really got it, and I think in that time, it draws you into that time and place, and really gives you a sense of what those folks were going through. Look, historical accuracy is fine and all of that, but that's not what this was about. This was not a documentary. This was a drama. This was a Western about a guy who has preconceived notions about what Native American folk are, and due to circumstances is forced to contend with them and realizes, they're not all bad. Some are bad, some aren't. Some white folk are bad, some aren't. And comes away maybe a better person through this ordeal. You have your drama, you have your action. There's a reason why it won, in the Academy Awards and the Golden Globe and all of that. It deserves it. The defense is beating up on this picture out of some personal agenda. But I think objectively speaking, it earns every award that it got. There's really nothing wrong, objectively speaking, with this movie. It may not be your particular flavor of vodka, but you can say that about just about anything, right? I think you have to take a step back and say, let's look at all of the elements. Let's go through our check boxes and look at all of the elements. Well acted? Check. Looks beautiful? Check. Seems to be doesn't seem to be any major plot holes in there. The plot seems to follow. Check. What else can you possibly ask for? Dances with Wolves is one of those pictures that I think if you wanted to show somebody, like, how do you make a motion picture where all of the elements work, this is a good one to show them, I think. Believe it or not. It's long. The Lord of the Rings is long. Gandhi is long. There's plenty of 3-hour plus movies out there. A couple years ago we did A Long Road to Ruin on the Man with No Name trilogy. Those movies were long and quiet and westerns and all of the things that we talk about with Dances with Wolves, but they weren't nearly as good as this one. They don't. The prosecution talked about how this movie doesn't hold up. Through what visage are we talking about here? Are we saying that in 2018 in the Me Too movement and all of these political correctness, saying he talked about the white man teaching the Indians how to blah blah yakety schmackety? It's a little hypercritical. I think it's still. I think as far as a motion picture, a piece of epic entertainment, it holds up just fine. I'll give the prosecution the last word here.
in terms of what lens I'm looking at it through, it actually, as a whole, isn't my personal agenda, as you put it, that tells me that it doesn't really hold up. It's this whole idea that this was actually the best movie that came out in 1990. That this was the cream of the crop that year. And to that, I just say, if you were to show this movie to somebody else and absolutely nothing else, absolutely none of the other big movies that came out that year, and you were to just start off by telling, hey, this was deemed the best picture of 1990 at the Oscars. Oh boy, I can't wait to watch it. My guess is by the end they would probably look at it bored to tears and say, the fuck else came out that year? My God. If this was the best, I don't even want to venture to see the Razzies. Okay, that's a bit of hyperbole. But on the other hand, if you were to show them that, and then show them a movie that was as both commercially successful, and I admit emotionally gripping as Ghost, as in its own way kind of important in what it had to say as Awakenings, as flat out enjoyable as Goodfellas was in pretty much every way, or any of those three. I just don't know how anybody would look at this and say, yep, that was the one, hands down, that was the best movie right there. It's one of those movies that when I look at the fact that it received Best Picture, I start to rethink how cynical I am towards the Oscars adding a Best Popular Film category, and I just kind of want to go, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. Because it kind of checks off every box for a strong Best Picture contender. Let's see. Enormous running time. Yep. Got it. Bankable star. Oh, hey, look at this. He not only acted in it, he directed it. Especially one with not much of an Oscar pedigree where we can kind of look at him and say, yeah, I think he might be due. Yep, got it. Period piece with tons of meticulous attention to detail. Yep, nailed it. Commentary on race relations or some other fairly ugly, uncomfortable chapter in American history. Yep, got it. So it's viewed as societally important. So, yeah, that pretty much hits all the Oscar bait buttons. Yep. And that's really...
Well, let me enter an objection to that statement. Because you keep saying the word, and let's kick this around for a bit. You keep saying the word Oscar bait. And I'm not being gimmicky when I say this, but I feel like that's a little cynical. I think you can definitely... You've done a great job of pointing out things that typically win Oscars. And I get why then what follows that statement is, and thus this is Oscar bait. But when it hits all of those... When it's hitting all of those boxes simply by virtue of that's just the kind of movie it is. In other words, Kevin Costner and oh gosh, who wrote this? Michael Blake didn't sit down with a checklist and go, we need this, we need this, we need this, because our object here is to win an Oscar. The object here was to tell this story in the most entertaining way they think they could, to make a piece of art that they could be proud of. I never got the impression through this that they were preening for an Oscar. So I don't...
No, but it's one of those movies that kind of further establishes the template that kind of goes along with these industry masturbatory awards that all you have to do is just kind of follow a certain set of prerequisites, and your peers will absolutely need a towel when they think of the thought of giving you shiny gold statues for it. It was nascent Oscar bait is what I would call it, because since then, it has become a cynical ploy for a lot of directors to make this kind of movie, or a lot of actors to say, if I just do this kind of movie, I'll finally get that Oscar.
As long as they don't go full retard.
Bingo. Now you're getting it. So, no, yes, this might have come out at a time when Oscar bait was not yet quite a full-fledged thing, but it was when the definition was becoming pretty firmly established.
I think the only point that I'm trying to stick to here is that if you sat Kevin Costner down in a room and say, "Tell me about your process with Dances with Wolves. What were you thinking?" I think he would talk to you about his feelings on Native Americans and about the Civil War and about what it means to be an American. I don't think he then says, "And I really wanted to win an Oscar, and I kept racking my brain, what the fuck kind of story am I going to write to win an Oscar?" I feel like the project is done. They're looking at the finished product. It's right before it's distributed. It's right before it's released. They're just kind of watching all of it come together, and then they look around the room and go, "This will probably win an Oscar," but it's an afterthought. The first thing was create the piece that speaks to the soul.
I think you're giving them a ton of credit.
Okay.
Like a metric fuck ton of credit.
Okay. Well, you know what? That's the one problem here is Kevin Costner refused to come on the show and speak to this.
And I imagine he would probably, he'd probably take your side rather than just flat out admitting, "Look, yeah, I knew this was pretty much a sure bet Academy Award nominee as soon as I read it.
I went home and fucked my Oscar. That's what I did. I wanted it so bad."
Because I really have nothing else at this point. Goddamn Waterworld. Goddamn the Postman. But then you kind of look at the fact that this won, according to their peers. Yes, this was Best Picture of the Year. But the thing is, my problem, that is, it doesn't really bother to try to find that crossover in the Venn diagram between masterful filmmaking. Yes, absolutely. I would agree with that, and I would even agree with you on that. It is visually, in every sensory way, in every sensory regard, it is a superbly made film. But it's also absolutely the least enjoyable to watch. It's not really rewatchable, I think, in terms of watching it and actually liking it. Yes, the performances are, amazing when you're seeing them, but again, do they really stick with you afterward? Do they have that Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird quality? Or what you think of when you think of any other really gripping, dramatic turn? Not really. No. And that's why I keep coming back to, I can't believe this beat Goodfellas. Because if you were to ask, I think, just about anybody who has seen both movies now, hey, which one did you enjoy more? Which one would you really want to sit down and watch again? Maybe not every day. Maybe it's not exactly your standard popcorn kind of movie. But what could you sit down and really savor about once a year or once every few years? I would almost assure you it would be Goodfellas, just about unanimously, with maybe a few people who would throw in and say, you know what, I really dug Ghost.
Can I go ahead and say that if you would ask, and like, I've seen all of these movies. Let's take The Godfather Part 3 out. It's trash.
I still maintain I kid a little bit about kind of being awkward about mentioning it as a Best Picture nominee. I still don't think it's quite as bad as most people say.
Okay, so that leaves, if I'm on the Academy Committee and I'm asked to choose, Best Picture among Dances with Wolves, Awakenings, Ghosts, and Goodfellas, I actually don't think they made the wrong choice. When I look at, because Ghost is very schmaltzy, and I would also and I would tell you that cinema, if we're looking at checking all the boxes, Ghost has probably the least appealing cinematography.
I would agree with that. I'll give you that.
Awakenings was the De Niro movie, right, where he's in the coma.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also a very schmaltzy movie. And so what you got left is Goodfellas. Goodfellas is, don't get me wrong, Goodfellas is an outstanding crime drama, but shot for shot versus Dances with Wolves, I don't see where it's superior. I think maybe on the acting. That's probably about the only place I'd put it.
I mean, it doesn't have the elaborate location shots.
Right.
But I think in terms of kind of its, and I'm going to be a bit film snobby here, sort of its economy of visuals,
mm-hmm.
and how it kind of says so much with so many relatively simple shots, and its sequencing is so effective in terms of its order. There's obviously the Copacabana shot. That's the one that almost everybody remembers best. So we'll just go ahead and just name drop that one. It kind of does more with less, and I think that's one of the reasons why I sort of prefer its approach to Dances with Wolves.
Let me throw this out there, and then I'm going to let you finish up.
I'm basically done. So.
Okay. If instead of Goodfellas, its competition had been Casino, I'd have given it to Casino.
Really?
Yeah, I think Casino is masterfully shot, and I think it's more interesting looking. I mean, the acting is pretty much the same, but including Sharon Stone going, just eating through the scenery like Miss Pac-Man. But even with that, I would tell you that Casino visually works better for me than Goodfellas. And if I had to compare, and if I had to pick one between Dances with Wolves and Casino, I think Casino is actually pretty vibrant. Whereas I don't remember Goodfellas coming off as vibrant at all. I feel like it was it was a stormy day through most of it.
Not vibrant, but for a movie that was also fictionalized, yes, in the same sense that Goodfellas was, but it was. I mean, it had its kind of historical anchors of its own too. I mean, keep in mind, it was also based on actual people and actual events.
Right.
So
we can never do Casino on this show because I would cry if I had to prosecute it.
I would never make you do that, and I don't. Because I also agree that is a phenomenal movie, and even one that I would almost say I don't think it necessarily gets the credit it deserves most times.
No, I think it's one of those where after Goodfellas and The Godfather and all these gangster pictures, it's like, and there's another one with Joe Pesci. It's like, no, but it's so good. It's so good. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of that one. It's always interesting to look at some of these, to go to the other side of the pendulum with some of these, because we tend to pick a lot of nonsense on this show. That's what makes it fun. But the occasional, like a couple of people who I said we were doing Dances with Wolves, their reaction was, what in the hell is there to prosecute? And you got to tune into the show to find out, see? But we're going to go from the sublime to the ridiculous next month. Oh, doggy. I can't wait for this. September 4th, we are going to put the Pamela Anderson superhero vehicle straight from the comics, Barbed Wire, on trial.
You know, I'll tell you why I'm actually not looking forward to this.
Okay.
Because I have made no bones about it on this show. There are few people in the online entertainment community that I have less respect for than Doug Walker.
Okay.
However, once upon a time, he reviewed Barbed Wire, and he pointed something out about it that once you notice it, you can never unsee it. Would you like to know what that is, Mark?
Bring it on, Big Daddy.
It's basically Casablanca.
Okay, then.
Laugh now, big boy. Laugh now and then watch the movie with that in mind. In fact, I will even go you one better. Here, right now, and God knows, I hate putting any money in that crotch stain's pocket. So if I can find a ripped off version of this review, I will send you that one instead of the official Channel Awesome or Legion of Super Douches or whatever the fuck it's called now. Official version of it that's gonna, earn him ad revenue. Nostalgia Critic. Barb. Oh, please let there be like a Russian upload. Swing and a miss. That guy with the glasses. Okay, although that one does not have a check mark next to it, so that might not be a verified channel. There's the official one from Channel Awesome. There's a censored version. Okay. Unless you've got a censored version that cuts Doug the fuck out of it and inserts somebody with talent.
Your point being, though, I should check out this review.
Hang on, I'm actually getting ready to link to it right now. Fuck off, shithead. Eat dick and like the taste of it.
All right. Well, you're doing that. So yes, next month, on Monday, September 3rd, Source Material will be doing the initial, I think, 9-issue run of Barbed Wire, and then we will be doing the on trial for that. And that is actually the only show you and I are doing together. September has Legion Season 2, Cloak and Dagger Season 1, The Predator on Damn You Hollywood, Iron Fist Season 2, and then finally on October 2nd, we've got Ozark Season 2. So we got a lot of TV parties in the month of September, because as we all know, when it comes to major motion pictures, September has overtaken January as fuck you, it's January. In the meantime, in between time, go ahead and check out some of our shows from last week. Source Material did Thor, The Reigning, and Gods and Monsters. We did a Screaming Boy for the firing of James Gunn called The Day That Laughter Died. We had an abbreviated review of Christopher Robin because I stopped the podcast instead of the music. So 2/3 of it did not get recorded. That's all right. We did a review of Bleeding Through, Love Will Kill All, and Sean and I have actually been spending a lot of time together this August. We did Glow Season 2 on August 2nd. We did Orange is the New Black on August 9th. And what the hell, a couple of corn dogs. We're going to close out. We're going to call, not only is this the end of the summer of Sean, but August is Genji Cohen month. Sure, why not? We're going to look at all 8 seasons of Weeds.
What can I say? Between you and several other people, my love of podcasting has kind of been reignited.
So August 23rd, because Sean has mentioned Nancy Botwick on so many other shows that I was like, I got to watch the show now, just because I got to see just how horrid she becomes, and the comparison between the first 3 seasons and the hot garbage the last 5 became, because I'm on season 7 now. Yeah, I have a lot to say. Most of it's fuck Nancy, and not in the good sense. So why wasn't this bitch hit with a Hummer? But for more of that brilliant insight, check out our series review. We don't get to do that very often. We usually, do it season by season, but obviously Weeds has been over for quite some time now. So we are going to spend some time, an hour or so, just kind of going over all the high points of all 8 seasons of Weeds. Get prepared to hear 60 minutes of, and Nancy was an asshole this way, and she was an asshole that way. So go ahead and check that out. Also, we've got the Meg review on Damn You Hollywood, and we've got on Metal Hammer of Doom, Cruachan, 9 Years of Blood. If you like your Celtic folk metal, you'll love that. And lastly, I just want a quick plug. The next source, I haven't been on the last couple of source materials. I will be on the next one, August 20th, and I'll be bringing along our good friend, Token Girl, Alexis Haina from Honeysuckle Rose Creation.
Girl.
Yes, that's the name we've given her. She's Token Girl. So, and she laughs. We had fun with that. But by her request and my desire, we looked at Paul Dini's run on Zatanna. So go ahead and check that show out. It was a lot of fun. All right, Sean, go ahead and plug what you're doing these days, and let's move on with life.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to be doing more podcasts these days. This is, as I said, it's tremendously fun and something that I haven't really I haven't been putting as much of my energy into as I would have liked the last couple of years. So it's good to kind of be getting my creative juices flowing again. As far as what I'm up to these days, aside from these podcasts, the best place to find me is on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ComerCodex. I'm streaming a little bit infrequently until I get moved back to Arizona at the end of October after I go to my best friend's wedding. You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/ComerCodex, for updates on when I'm going to be streaming and when, podcast updates, various and sundry pop culture rantings, this, that, the other thing. Quite frankly, a lot of times if you want to find me and just hang out, if you happen to be on a PlayStation 4 and play Overwatch, my PSN is Sean C. Comer, and I'm currently looking for competitive teammates in bronze. Especially if you play healer or main tank.
Are you any good at Fortnite?
Fuck Fortnite.
Hey man, you could get a gig tutoring people in Fortnite. Apparently that's a thing now.
Well, there are also a lot of competitive Overwatch coaches, because they have a real esport. But no, just make sure that if you send me an invite or something, not that I'm really expecting anybody to, just mention that you heard me on the Rodlich and Broadcasting Network, so I know that you are not just some weirdo rando. But no, I do not play Fortnite. Do not bloody ask if I play Fortnite. The answer will be no and probably a ban. But no, Overwatch, Dead by Daylight, Paladins, Smite, Black Ops 3 if I ever get back into it. Go ahead. Go with all that stuff. But otherwise, I also have a couple channels I would like to plug since they were immensely helpful as I researched and kind of built my case for the show. The first is one called History Buffs, which looks only partially at the quality of movies, but tends to focus instead on their devotion to period accuracy. their episode on Dances with Wolves was gripping. They spent about 20, 30 minutes actually talking about the movie, and then another 30-minute or so fascinating discussion of the history of the Lakota Sioux. So by all means, check their channel out. It is seriously good stuff. The other one, and I've rediscovered her work recently, and I'm extremely pleased that I gave it another chance. Lyndsey Ellis. Some of my opinions were kind of genuinely changed by a video essay she did. I believe it was either this year or last year, about sort of kind of revisiting the impact of Disney's Pocahontas, and its sort of greater scope in movies of its time. Give her channel just a look in general. I know that our good buddy Andrew Graham is a big fan of hers, and absolutely rightfully so. And on a slightly sentimental note, she's also kind of indirectly responsible for me meeting and becoming acquainted with my very best friend in the world. So there's a little bit of that in there too. But otherwise, if you want a discussion on film's place in society, overall review, critique, internet culture, she's good stuff. She's good people. So check it out. Otherwise, how this goes. I'm Sean. You're not. Please never dull your colors for someone else's canvas. $20 will buy you mini peanuts, and I will see you soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on the Rattleton Broadcasting Network. All rise. Court is now out of session. Be well, be safe, and behave.